So a few weeks ago, Anya and I caught up for a coffee, and Anya said to me, what do you want to do about let's do a launch or something for your book, let's have an event for your book. And we were tossing around where, and I think a library landed as a pretty good place, being the custodian of numerous books. And we also chewed the fat over things like, I wonder who'll come, and will they be CMI members, and will they be non-members? Will people come who we don't know? Will it be all the people that we know? Will it be newbies? Will it be people who are wanting to get into change? Will it be really experienced people? And guess what? We've got the whole spectrum here. Okay, we have got so many people here that fit into all of those categories and more, which has been amazing. So the common thread that has really brought us together has been either a passion for change or that we're working in change. So it's great to be able to have an event like that and to meet new people through that passion or that work. So that's great. A couple of other things we've got in common. Everyone in this room has a copy of my book, so that's a cool thing. And everyone in this room was happy to not sit down and watch Married at First Sight in real time in their lounge room. So for that, I am really, really grateful, because I know that's tough competition, okay?
Not everybody.
I had to drag Jen away, but, you know, it took some convincing. So the other thing that's kind of funny, in the sense that the diverse range of people who've actually come forth and purchased the book, has been, back in the days when it was being reviewed, one of my reviewers said, this is so the Bible of change management. That's the first time I've ever had my name in the Bible in the same sentence, which was confronting enough. But then one of my pre-orders came through, and I have to let you in on a little secret. When I get a book order that comes through, I'll go and look up the person on LinkedIn, because I can't help myself, right? And that's the curious side of me, and I'm sure everyone would do that. And when I looked this guy up, he's actually a priest. So I thought, oh, maybe it is getting a little closer to really being a Bible. So I was blown away by that. That's got to be a first for me, ever. Okay, a little bit about socials. If you are inclined to do social media or follow social media, these are the hashtags, which will also appear, I think, on almost every slide after this. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story about the power of the hashtag. 2.5 years ago, Dr. Jen and I were writing books, and it turned out that our books were going to be published at the same time, so we thought, hey, let's have a joint book launch. And let's do Brain Pickers Live, which was a live Q&A. And I know some people in this room, you can put your hand up if you want, we're there. Yeah, there's a few of you there, and you've come back for more, so thank you for that. Right, so Brain Pickers Live had its own hashtag, and we were trending in Melbourne on Twitter. So that's the power of the hashtag. You can find things, and you can actually use it to follow others and really use it as a knowledge management tool, and also to find what else is going on with that hashtag. Those of you who follow Married at First Sight probably use the MAFS hashtag to watch Twitter in real time. I'm not obsessed with it at all. Can I just say, this was in July, in the month of July in 2017. Jen, we out-trended The Bachelor for a while there. Yeah, we were out-trending The Bachelor in Melbourne.
Australia as well.
In Australia as well, there you go. So can we out-trend MAFS tonight? I'm going to put it back onto you guys. My phone's already, I can hear my phone beeping, so maybe it's going to happen. Okay, in your bags, you've got a learning canvas, which may be helpful if you want to take notes. Okay, I use this a lot. If you're the type that prefers to take notes in your phone or not take notes at all, that's totally fine, but I found this a really good way to capture some key takeaways and maybe take some summary notes from the book. Now, this is based on chapter 29 of my book. This little talk now that I'm doing on Change is Changing is based on chapter 29, and chapter 29 starts on this page, 222. Okay, how many people in this room have heard the mantra that change management is dead? How many of you heard that? Yeah, it's pretty common, isn't it? If you Google change management is dead, this is how many results you'll get. That's when you do the inverted commas. If you're like a loose Googler and don't use your inverted commas or your plus signs, you'll go into the hundreds of thousands of returns on Google. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff out there that says change management is dead, and they attribute that idea, if you like, to a number of things. Sometimes they'll attribute it to the fact that there's agile coaches now, so why do we need change managers? Sometimes they'll say change leaders can do it now, change is everybody's business. Sometimes they might say in a VUCA environment you can't manage change anyway. And some of those are valid, but largely they're not, because I would argue that change management is not dead, but it is changing. So the title change management may wane, but the function and the role that we play to help people adopt is definitely not going anywhere. So we're going to explore that a little bit further. So I think we're good. Okay, key message there. Okay, so my voice still okay? Yep. How change is changing. Where I start with all that is looking at the backdrop. Okay, what's the macro environment? What's going on? How is the stage set? And we've all heard of VUCA now. It's okay, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That environment is there for all businesses. And we also have the notion of new power, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about if that notion is new to you. So new power is about how formal and hierarchical power is now giving way to power that's associated with technology and social capital and people who can influence in very different ways, and we will take a closer look at that. The other thing that's going on that's really helpful to know is for a long time we've heard about the future of work, the future of change management. And I say to people, stop talking about the future already, it's here. Okay? Because if we keep saying it's the future, we're really abdicating responsibility and sense of urgency to do something right now. We're saying, oh, we'll worry about that when, when robotics comes into our business. So we'll worry about that when that happens. And I'd like to actually work with the notion that the future is now. So if someone says to me, will you come and do a talk about the future of change management? I go, I'd rather not. Can I frame it a little bit differently, like change is changing? So, the gig economy. Who's heard of the gig economy? Okay, and most people have. As change practitioners or aligned with change practitioners in whatever we do, we are pretty much knowledge workers. So knowledge workers can now move around. As we know, there's fewer permanent roles and more fixed term roles and more contract roles. So talented people move and people want talent. Right, so they've realised that for that, in this type of economy, we need to improve the employee experience. So Jacob Morgan is a really great thought leader in this space if you're not following him already. So the employee experience is now touted as more important than the customer experience. So the reason for that is, and this is one of Richard Branson's things, is if we don't look after our employees, how the hell are they going to look after the customer? So it starts with the employee experience, that employee value proposition. Because if you can't hold on to talent, then you're going to lose them to someone better. And then if they're better, they're going to be better with customers. And we know it's all about human-centric work now, because that's what we do, which is the next point. Regardless of artificial intelligence, regardless of robotics, regardless of Internet of Things, and all those things that are coming and that are here, not in the future, they're already here, right? We are still dealing with people who are impacted by these changes. So it's still human-centred. So our role is still very much human-centred. If you work on a digital transformation or you work on a transformation that embodies any of those things or relies on STEM skills, we're still talking about people. And people are human. So until they replace all of us with machines, we are in a human-centric role. So I like to remind people of that, because some people get worried about, are we still going to be relevant when, as AI comes, are we still going to be relevant in the future? And I say to them, well, there's still humans working in organisations. We are very much needed individuals. Our skills are very much wanted. So that's the backdrop. Just keep that in mind, because that's now the stage is set. Now, VUCA and Black Swan events. Okay, Black Swan. Who's heard of Black Swan events? Popularised by the author Nassim Taleb. A Black Swan was they're named Black Swans events because when people first came to Australia and saw black swans, they were blown away. They didn't think such a thing existed. So it was pretty rare, right? So a surprise event that has major impact. We are seeing more and more Black Swan events now, and the VUCA environment makes them a hell of a lot more intense and global, because of the way we're digitised, the way we're connected, the way the economy now is so interdependent on a global scale. So we know one of our Black Swan events, Australia Pacific, made a lot of headline news and had a lot of far-reaching impact. There's supply chains, there's a lot of interdependencies now in the economy. Another Black Swan event we're in right now, of course, the virus. So all these things are compounded. So if you think about how quickly and easily people can travel now and how information travels, these things are kind of amplified, if you like, by VUCA. So what that means for change people is that planned change, it's not all about planned change anymore. Anyone here working in an industry that has had to do some responsive communications or work because of these two events? Yeah, so it's impacting a lot of people. I don't think I'd like to work in a cruise industry right now and do all their comms, but you know where I'm going with this. So it is quite unpredictable. So less planned change, more responsive and iterative change. New power. New power was popularised by a book by the same name. It was written by Jeremy Hymans, who's Australian. I love saying that. Jeremy Hymans is Australian. His co-writer, Henry Timms, is from New York. Jeremy's got a really good TED Talk called What New Power Looks Like that he did in 2014, and then their book was published in 2018. And their notion is that power is now a lot more distributed, and it is this globalisation and this digitisation that's really driven that new power. And we know now, I don't need to introduce those photographs, do I? I will talk about the one on the bottom though. But people now have a lot of power and social capital independent of title and money. Once upon a time you would have expected it was the Bill Gates who was doing all the donations, or a large corporate doing a lot of stuff. Now, let's go back to the bushfires. I'm going to do a little bit of a poll, very casual poll. It'll be show of hands, no high tech required. Before the bushfires, how many knew or what the AFL was, the Australian Football League? How many had heard of the AFL? I'd say probably nearly everyone. Before the bushfires, how many knew who Celeste Barber was? About half. Okay, so after the bushfires, just immediately after, Celeste Barber raises 52 million and the AFL raised 2.5 million. Now, that's not an indictment on the AFL. I'm just drawing a comparison now with social capital and social power. They've both done a great job. But that's just to give you an idea of how social capital works now in the world of new power. What that means for us as change practitioners or in the workplace is that we engage differently now, because power isn't always with people who've got a title or the corner office. So that's shifting. So we're going to look at that. It means that we're going to lead differently, think differently, learn differently, and deliver change differently. Okay, so I've summarised the key shifts in what this means for change practitioners in these 5 shifts. Planned to iterative, and I talked about less planned change with VUCA. Top-down to co-created is the real new power playing out. Engagement to empathy, I'll talk about that. Artefacts to experiments, and practitioner to advisor. Okay, and we're starting to see these shifts. Now, when you see a diagram like that from me specifically, that does not mean it's a binary thing. Okay, it's not a dichotomy. It means that we do less of what's on the left and more of what's on the right, or there's shifting going that way. I have put a couple of these diagrams up on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden I've been slammed for, it's not like that, it's not black and white. That's not what I said, but anyway. You put yourself out on social media, you become very vulnerable, right? And that's what you have to do, and that's okay. Okay, so less planned and more iterative, what that means for us, whether we're in change or not, means that we draw on a range of tools. And those tools may come from Lean, they may come from Agile, they may come from design thinking, they may come from DevOps, they may come from org development, they may come from somewhere that I haven't thought of or that hasn't been invented yet. But they come from a range of practices. And we design them fit for purpose. So it means the days of my first change job, I was given a Gantt chart with a list of artefacts. No questions asked. Here's what the change person done. Here's when you have to do them. And you have to report red, amber, green if you've done them or not, or how you're tracking with them. And there was really no correspondence entered into, and I didn't have the confidence either because I was fairly new. But that was when change was done in a very planned way, in a very waterfall way, with a list of artefacts to deliver. And there was very much, until very recently, there was very much a push on one way, same way. We have one change framework. We do change the same way across the organisation, regardless of the change. So it's all very professional and very slick. And I've been in organisations where I've actually designed change frameworks that did this because it was at that point in time it was the right thing to do. What it means, though, is what happens when you let go of something that's safe? What happens when we let go of something that has served us well for so long? This is what we do. We can have a hissy fit, but we can also focus on principles, not formula. So if you have a good set of principles that you have designed or co-designed with your change team or your project team, or even like a little contract with yourself, you will be okay. And those principles can be things like, I will make sure that I right-size my change effort for the change that I'm working on rather than overcooking it. I will try more experiments as long as I keep my stakeholders involved with what I'm doing, that I'm trying things out, so I'll manage their expectations. So if you come up with a set of change principles or principles, you will feel more comfortable moving away from that formula. And we've done a lot of work, Jen and I have done a lot of work with change teams and leadership teams working out their own principles because they know that now formula doesn't work anymore. The environment is too nimble, it's too adaptive, and to work with responsive change rather than planned change in a VUCA environment with black swan events fraught with new power, you need to do things differently. And Richard Feynman is one of my favourite physicists from way back. He's got some fantastic quotes. Okay, less top-down, more co-created. Here's where new power comes into it, and the practice of design thinking becomes our best friend because it is totally human-centred. There's also some other agile practices, and I've got a lot in the chapter called Communicate to Co-create, so a lot more info on these. Working out loud, enterprise social networks, lean coffee, and focusing on the employee experience, and thinking about who are the influencers in the organisation rather than people who've just got titles. So that's less top-down cascading communications. Our change planning and communications planning for a long time has been centred on, let's have a town hall, then let's get the GMs, and then let's cascade the communications and give them all talking points. And I'm not saying get rid of that. That probably still has a place in a lot of organisations. But there's these other channels here now where you can find your hidden influencers who have a lot of social capital, like the Gretas and the Celeste Barbers in your organisation. They're there. You can find them through these channels and also start to work with informal power, informal influences to spread the word. There's a lot of work going around with organisational network analysis in a Danish company, and they say that 3% of the 3% of your organisation, the people in your organisation, have 60 to 70% of the influence, and that 3% are not all people in senior roles. So you've got to find them. So it's good to know. And the other good thing about design thinking is if you start to work with empathy maps and journey maps, you really are moving from engagement to empathy. Okay, engagement is pretty much something that we're familiar with, something we do a lot of one way, we do a lot of two-way engagement through forums and those other channels I had before. But once you really shift it to empathy and you invite people to co-create, and particularly invite people to talk about how they think, how they're feeling and what they're thinking rather than just doing, which is what we know the impact assessment is all about doing at the moment. Once we start to introduce these extra dimensions into your impact assessments, into your, what do you want people to be doing in the future, you are giving them permission to talk about their feelings. You're giving them permission to talk about their thoughts. And quite often there's no safe place to do that. You are creating a safe space for them to talk about that because there's a framework for it. So go for it. And fewer artefacts and more experiments. So I wrote this a little bit like a user story. So as a change consultant, I want to be brave and introduce experiments that invite people to contribute and iterate. So therefore I can have fewer unnecessary artefacts. How do you do that? You manage stakeholder expectations. You use language around the word experiment. So I tend to say to people, I'd like to experiment with something. It might not work, but hey, if it does work, it's going to be awesome, or we can iterate it. So it's really about managing what you're doing up front, and that's a way of working out loud as well. So a lot of these practices cross over. And this is one, we're starting to see this shift now a lot. I'm having conversations with a lot of change practitioners who are saying, I'm more of a change advisor now, like the old HR business partner. I'm now more like, the change business partner. People are really coming to me for advice. And they're doing that because you're probably starting to demonstrate these agile and emergent practices that are involving them, and they want more of it. As soon as you start modelling behaviours, there's this thing called contagion. I know that's not a good word to use right now, but I'm going to use it. There's emotional contagion and social contagion, and people will mimic what you're doing. Every time I work out loud or do something a little bit different on a client side, they want to know, they're innately curious. They want to know more about it and try it out. So you have no idea. Don't underestimate the influence that you have. When you start modelling them, your adaptive approach is going to signal that shift from being a toolkit-centred change practitioner. If you start questioning, do we really need all these tools? How about we right-size the change effort? What do the people really want? What's going to work for them? You are signalling that you're becoming a people-centred trusted advisor. So you're really shifting the notion, and that may shift actually the title of change manager to change advisor. That doesn't matter. Our role is still going to be really, really relevant and very human-centric. So, as future fit change practitioners, which you all are, your superpowers are to be courageously curious. Ask the questions. It's to learn fast. Okay, there's that thing about don't just learn fast, learn faster than everyone else because you want to be in that top talent and get the best jobs. So learning is the new superpower. Hey, it's the 4th of March today, and I'm really, really excited because it's the book launch evening. In conjunction with Change Management Institute Victoria, we've got a great event here. We're at the library at the docks. Have a look at the surroundings. We're on Victoria Harbour, which is fantastic, and we're in for a really, really good night. We've got 70 people coming, and I'm doing a short talk, and we're having wine and nibbles, and yeah, it's going to be great.
We've got Anya here, the chapter lead for CMI from Victoria.
I'm super excited to welcome everyone to the event tonight. I'm really looking forward to Lena introducing her new book, and actually can't wait to read it myself. So really, really excited, and get her to talk a little bit about change is changing as well. So she's an amazing thought leader, so what an event.
We have the Dr. Jen from the one and only who wrote the foreword to Lena Ross's second book.
Yes, I did.
Yes. How have you found this evening, and what would you like to say?
Great night. The conversations are amazing that's going on. It's a really, really vibrant, connected community that is really getting into some meaty stuff in their conversations. So, beyond the value of Lena's book and what you can get out of that, it's times 10 in terms of the conversations that are happening. So it's great. Yeah.
Conversations.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The key thing I'm going to take away is it's all about teaching principles, not formulas. So what that means is change is ever going to change, right? But we can get the principles right, we'll be suited for anything.
I think for me, new power really resonated. I think that's so critical in organisations. I think the stat from Denmark, about 3% of the staff have 60 to 70% of the power, and it's not people with the titles. I think that's critical in nowadays. It's not top down, it's really bottom up in a lot of ways, and it's finding those key people to be able to influence organisations to drive change organically that really resonated with me.
I found Lena's talk absolutely fascinating, and one of the things that really resonated with me was the use of new power and where that came from within organisations. Change can come from anywhere, and that new power can be a major source of change. So it's less about the frameworks and more about how to engage more responsibly with new power.
I just think it was so refreshing to hear Lena talk about the way that change has to change. We're talking about it, I talk about it, but people aren't hearing it yet. We're stuck in our old ways of working, in the traditional approaches to change management, which are just not going to cut it anymore.
For me, the key take was definitely social capital. The comparison between Celeste Barber, I think her name is, versus the AFL and the amount of money they generated. Both great causes, but it's quite interesting how AFL's a lot well known, but they were only able to generate, was it 2 million or so, compared to, Celeste's 50 million. So social capital is power.
The talk today, Lena is always at the forefront of change, and that is why I will be reading her book tonight. And what's keeping me awake at night, I guess, is what does the future look like for change? And I think this talk today has been really, really helpful.
What's keeping me up at night is probably exactly what Lena talked about tonight, which was change is changing. So we've now got a challenge around old world governance and trying to bring a new way of thinking and a new way of looking at how do we report on value for our change efforts.
To me, I love the concept about adaptive change. So I like the idea that we're in such a complex universe and that we need to really look at focusing about how we adapt things to the audience.
I think Lena's always got a new take on what's relevant to be successful, and I love her multidisciplinary approach. So I think the key takeaway for me was the importance of employee experience is greater than customers. I've always thought employees are number one, so it just reinforced that for me tonight.
Listen, tonight was fantastic. As always, Lena was brilliant, and can't wait to read the second book. And I think from tonight I took away the fact that change management is all about human beings, so it's all about that human-centred approach and that empathy being the most important thing that you need to be thinking about as a change practitioner.
The mindset, the methodologies of doing change are still there, but they're getting adapted and adopted into different ways of working.
Wow, it was fantastic. There was so much in it. One of the key things that I'm taking away, and I'm going to use this tomorrow, is the future is now. It's not tomorrow, it's now. This is fantastic insight.
It's been a wonderful night here at the book launch for Lena's second book. And I can't actually tell you how amazing it's been to hear a little bit more about change is changing, and you still hear a little bit of the background noise. So it's all been about celebrating Lena, celebrating us as the change community, and really the amazing connections that come out of that one. So join us for the next one.